They buried her in a wooden box, but the scratching didn't stop. It echoed through the floorboards of that farmhouse like a whisper the earth itself wanted to silence. The year was 1821, Pennsylvania, a place where superstition wore the mask of religion and fear ruled every heart like a second conscience. She was 8 years old, nameless in official records, and cursed with something no preacher's prayer could cleanse: teeth. Not just in her mouth, not just in her gums, teeth all over her body, sprouting from her skin, breaking through her arms, her legs, even her back. The midwives swore they could hear them grinding when she breathed. The town called her unnatural, a child born of Satan's laughter, and the more they tried to hide her, the more the whispers spread. But this story isn't about one cursed child, it's about the system that created her. It's about the silent war between faith and fear, and how a single body became the battlefield. The child was a mirror, a reflection of the sickness buried under America's founding soil, a sickness that fed on obedience and shame. Families were told she was a punishment, proof of their secret sins, but I'm here to tell you the truth. She wasn't a curse, she was evidence. Evidence that those who claimed power over life and death knew things about the human body, about you, that they never wanted revealed, and they buried her before she could expose them. You've been told your body is your own, your mind your sanctuary. It isn't. Since before you were born, forces older than your government, older than the Constitution, have been mapping you, marking you, molding you. This child was a casualty of that control. What they did to her, they still do to you. But now it's hidden beneath cleaner language, shinier tools and smiling faces. If you stay with me, you'll see it. You'll see the shadowy hands shaping your life without Evie. They're touching you. You weren't meant to hear this. But once you do, you'll never see your reflection the same way again. Her parents swore they were God-fearing. That was the first lie. Behind their farmhouse walls, fear wasn't faith. It was a weapon, sharpened by the whispers of men in robes who told them their daughter was tainted. She was born with a soft cry, a warm body, and a single tooth on her shoulder. At first they hid it, covering her with shawls, telling neighbors she was fragile, sickly. But by her 4th birthday, the teeth had spread like white pearls erupting from beneath her skin, pressing outward until her tiny frame seemed armored in bone. The neighbors stopped visiting. Her father drank. Her mother prayed. And when the preacher came, he didn't bring comfort. He brought scripture twisted like rope. He told them, "This is what happens when a family harbors sin." The family submitted. That's what families were taught to do then, to kneel, to obey. But behind the preacher's smile was something colder than faith: knowledge. You see, the church and the early doctors of the 19th century worked hand in hand, not in the way they told you, but in the way predators and hunters coordinate. Faith softened resistance. Science took what it wanted. The girl's condition was no mystery to them. They'd seen it before, in asylums, in orphanages, in special wards that the public never heard about. The priests told parents it was the devil's work. The doctors called it curiosity. And when no one was watching, they studied these children like insects. Do you know why they buried her so quickly? It wasn't shame, it wasn't grief. It was because someone was coming for her body, someone who didn't want her buried at all. The family thought they were hiding her. In truth, they were delivering her, like every other nameless child who vanished from history, to the hands of an institution that believed the human body was nothing more than clay to be sculpted, broken, and rebuilt. You think, this is just a sad story of an old village superstition? No. This is where the blueprint began. The very systems that track your medical records today, the networks that hold your DNA, the algorithms that can predict your next thought, they all trace back to a time when children like her were marked for study. This is what happens when power stops pretending to love you, and we are still living in that world. The truth is, 1821 Pennsylvania wasn't an innocent time. It was a laboratory. The land looked quiet, rolling hills, farms, wooden chapels, but beneath that simplicity, a network of power pulsed like veins under pale skin. The church, the doctors, the wealthy landowners, they worked together, not for faith, not for healing, but for knowledge. Knowledge they didn't want you to have. Children like her, the girl with teeth erupting from her body, weren't seen as tragedies. They were opportunities, and when a child became an opportunity, she stopped being human. Records from that era are deliberately sparse. Births unrecorded, deaths left unmarked, graves unlisted. But in the margins of old medical journals, buried under faded ink and coded language, you can find whispers, osteodermal anomalies, spontaneous bone proliferation, regenerative abnormality. They spoke clinically because the truth was too monstrous to write plainly. They were watching evolution twist itself in real time, and they didn't see it as God's curse or the devil's mark. They saw her as proof that nature could be bent, molded, accelerated. She was a living experiment, and they wanted her back. Her parents didn't know they were playing a part in something older than them, older than this country. For centuries, powerful families, secret orders, and medical pioneers used rural towns as breeding grounds for studies. They called it progress. It was really surveillance. Every child was a data point, every deformity a lesson, every anomaly a key to unlocking control over human biology. And when a child like her was born, they didn't ask how, they asked, what can we take from her? You think this kind of control is modern, tied to screens, trackers, and algorithms? No, the net was woven long before the internet. Generations of men have lived and died without ever realizing they were livestock in someone else's experiment. The girl's teeth weren't random. She was born into a system that had already decided her fate. A body mapped by forces that understood the human genome before science even had the language for it. And here's the part that should unsettle you. Those experiments never stopped. They simply became cleaner. The men who dissected her now wear lab coats instead of robes. The church swapped its pulpit for media platforms. The whispers are louder than ever, but disguised as truth, as fact, as progress. Tell me, are you starting to see the pattern yet? By the time her body was lowered into the ground, her story wasn't hers anymore. It belonged to them. The men who dissected her bones would never speak her name. They would speak only of samples and phenomena. That's how control begins, by stripping away identity. She wasn't a child, she was a specimen, a resource, a data point. And while the grieving family thought they had hidden her shame, her body had already been marked. This was the dawn of a philosophy that still rules you today. Back then, it didn't have a name. Now you know it as eugenics. Before it was a political movement, before it became a weapon wielded openly in the 20th century, it was a whisper in secret societies, a quiet conviction among the powerful. Humanity could be perfected, and those who controlled birth, sickness, and death would decide who lived. This little girl wasn't their first experiment. She was one more link in a chain of silent trials stretching back centuries. The teeth that erupted from her skin weren't a curse, they were a revelation. Proof that the human body could rewrite itself, proof that life could be altered, accelerated, even weaponized. Do you think they buried that kind of discovery? No, they buried her, but they kept her secret alive. From hidden hospital basements to locked asylum wings, they collected anomalies, studied them, broke them, and learned from them. And as medicine advanced, their cruelty simply evolved. Chains became scalpels, scalpels became syringes, and syringes became algorithms that track your biology in ways you can't even see. If you've ever wondered why governments, corporations, and religious powers seem so united in their obsession with health, surveillance, and public safety, you're not paranoid. That obsession began here, with children like her, with quiet graveyards filled with unmarked bodies, each one a notebook of genetic secrets stolen by men who wanted to play God. They built entire philosophies of control on these discoveries, systems that didn't just target bodies, but minds. The pulpit told parents to submit, the doctor told them to trust, and between those two voices, resistance died. This is why your ancestors obeyed. This is why you obey without even realizing it. The blueprint was written in blood, bone, and teeth. Once you understand that, you'll never hear a doctor's voice or a preacher's prayer the same way again. Fear was their sharpest tool, not scalpels, not shackles, fear, and they wielded it with precision. In 1821, a family like hers didn't need guards outside their door or bars on their windows. They were prisoners in their own minds. The preacher's voice was enough. The gossip of neighbors was enough. Shame was enough. This is how power survives through centuries. It convinces you that your chains are holy, that your prison is virtue, that your silence is righteousness. Her parents didn't fight back because they believed they deserved punishment. They believed their daughter's suffering was proof of their sin. That's the perfect trap. When you convince someone that their suffering is their fault, they'll never rise against the hand that inflicts it. This little girl became a weapon without even knowing it. The sight of her was used to terrify others into obedience. The whispers of her curse spread faster than the truth ever could, tightening the grip of those who ruled the town. And while they feared her as a child of darkness, the real darkness was in the men taking notes by candlelight, documenting every strange tooth that forced its way through her skin. They didn't see her as evil. They saw her as a door into forbidden knowledge, one they'd kill to keep open and kill again to keep quiet. You need to see what's happening here. This is the same playbook being used on you today, just dressed in modern language. Fear keeps you obedient. Shame keeps you quiet. When a society wants to control a man, it doesn't need chains. It needs a narrative. A story so powerful, it rewrites your instincts. Back then, they called it God's will. Today, they call it science, safety, progress. But the effect is the same. You obey without question, because to question is to risk exile. Generations of men have been raised in this web, trained to follow rules they never agree. Living under invisible laws written long before they were born. That girl's body was turned into a warning, a symbol that power owns your future, your family, even your flesh. And most men accepted that truth without ever realizing it. The question is, will you? There's something you need to understand about the 1800s. Medicine was not about healing. It was about ownership. Whoever owned the knowledge of the human body owned the human being. And this little girl, she wasn't just a curiosity. She was an asset. Behind every case study was a network. Wealthy men funding research, churches eager to frame abnormalities as divine punishment, and surgeons desperate to carve their names into history. They didn't just study children like her, they traded them. Families would hand over their own sons and daughters in exchange for money, favors, or the hope of salvation. Many of those children vanished into asylums, never to be seen again. And if you think this is just a tragic footnote, look closer. This is the seed of every corrupt institution that now governs your body and mind. Hospitals, psychiatric wards, research labs, all of it built on a foundation of secrecy and sacrifice. They learned early that fear could create endless patience, that shame could silence entire generations, that power isn't about caring for the sick, it's about deciding who is even worth saving. In her case, the transformation of her body became a spectacle, but it wasn't just villagers who whispered. Men with titles, doctors, priests, scholars, began traveling miles to observe. They scribbled in notebooks by candlelight, documenting every detail, the yellowing of her teeth, the way her skin thinned as if she were aging from the inside out. They touched her without asking, cut strands of her hair for samples, pried open her mouth to measure each tooth. Every test, every violation was justified in the name of science. But science in 1821 was not pure. It was a weapon. The men surrounding her weren't seekers of truth. They were hunters, and she was prey. This is where you start to see the pattern. Centuries later, the names have changed. The technolin, is cleaner, but the system is the same. Your body is data, your fear is currency, and someone, somewhere, is profiting from both. This story is not about one little girl. It's about the creation of a machine that feeds on human suffering while convincing you it's for your own good. And here's the terrifying part. This machine didn't die with her. It grew. Imagine waking up in a body you no longer recognize. Your hands, once soft and plump with childhood, now veined and brittle like an old woman's. Your reflection in the mirror, if they even let you see it, was a stranger. She had your eyes, but they were sunken deep, shadowed by a face that had aged decades overnight. For a child, reality is already fragile, but hers shattered completely. At first, she believed it was a curse. Her mother had whispered about spirits that lurked in their village, spirits that punished children who disobeyed. Every ache in her bones felt like proof that she was being punished. Every stare from the villagers felt like confirmation that she wasn't human anymore. But soon, they stripped even that belief from her. When the doctors came, they didn't speak to her. They spoke over her, around her, as if she were an object. She was no longer the girl, she was a case. They told her to open her mouth, hold still, let them cut a small piece of her hair. They didn't ask, they commanded, and the more she obeyed, the less she felt alive. Children crave comfort, touch, reassurance. She got cold hands, steel tools, and endless questions she couldn't understand. They called her by numbers, measurements, and medical terms she didn't know. Slowly, she began to believe she was no longer a child at all. At night, she overheard their whispers, words like degeneration, anomaly, and specimen, words she couldn't define, but their tone made her stomach twist. She started to fear her own body, her breath, the way her heartbeat sometimes stuttered. She thought maybe she really was cursed, or worse, maybe she wasn't even human anymore. This is what no textbook tells you. Science has always been psychological warfare. They weren't just studying her, they were rewriting her mind. Every day she was reminded she was different, sick, broken, worth studying but not saving. And that's how they made sure she stayed quiet. Because silence is the first symptom of control. She stopped crying. She stopped asking questions. She stopped speaking altogether, and that's exactly when they began to document her most closely because now she was the perfect subject, alive, silent, and terrified. Fear moves faster than truth. By the second morning, the story of the girl who had aged 40 years overnight had already left her home and seeped into every corner of the village. Whispers turned into rumors, and rumors became warnings. Some said she had been cursed by an old witch. Others claimed she had been touched by demons. A few muttered that she had eaten something forbidden, that her own family had brought shame upon the village. No one dared come close. Neighbors who once smiled at her mother now crossed the street. Children who used to play with her were dragged away by their parents, their eyes wide, their steps quick. Even the priest hesitated to bless their home, standing at the threshold like he was afraid the evil inside might reach for him. The house itself felt like it was shrinking. Food left outside their door became rarer each day, as though the entire village had decided to starve them out. Her father stopped going to work. Every time he stepped outside, people stared like he was carrying a plague. Her mother stayed up all night, whispering prayers and weeping softly, her hands trembling as she touched her daughter's frail face. At first, her parents fought to keep her home, to protect her, but fear is a slow poison, even for those who love you. Her father began to talk about taking her to the city, saying doctors would fix her. Her mother argued that the city doctors would do worse than fix her, they would take her away forever. Every night their arguments grew louder, their voices shaking with terror rather than anger. And she heard all of it. Children aren't supposed to understand words like monster, burden, or too dangerous. But she did. She understood because her parents no longer held her the same way. They still loved her, but their hands trembled when they touched her skin, as if afraid her curse might seep into them. It wasn't just her reflection that made her feel like a stranger. It was the way even her own family began to look at her like something fragile and unnatural. By the end of that week, the decision was made. Her father would take her to the city. He told her it was to make her better. But when she looked into his eyes, she knew better. He was afraid of her too. The city hospital was nothing like her village home. It smelled of iron and bleach, the air too sharp to breathe. The walls were white, but not the soft kind of white. This was a blinding, sterile white that made her feel even smaller. No one smiled when they saw her. No one asked her name. They just stared. The doctors circled her like vultures, their faces unreadable behind round spectacles. They whispered in Latin, pointing at her hands, her skin, her hair, her face, every part of her catalogued like she wasn't a child at all, but a specimen trapped behind glass. They didn't ask permission. They measured her bones, her pulse, her eyesight. They poked her with needles and held her eyelids open with cold metal instruments. One man took a strand of her hair and placed it into a tiny vial, like it was a clue to something dangerous. Another pressed on her ribs and murmured, "Extraordinary. Impossible." No one called her by her name anymore. Instead, she was the patient, the subject, or worse, the case. Her father stood in the corner of the room, hat in his hands, his shoulders heavy with shame. He didn't stop them. He couldn't. The doctors spoke to him in low voices, their words cold and precise, like they were describing a broken machine. "Premature senescence," one said. "Genetic anomaly," said another. "A scientific miracle." To them, she wasn't a little girl who liked to climb trees and pick wildflowers. She was a puzzle, a thing to be solved. They didn't take her home that night. They said she needed observation. The word sounded gentle, but the room they locked her in was not. It was small, with metal bars over the window, the bed strapped to the floor so it wouldn't move. The sheets smelled like chemicals. She sat on the edge of the bed, her feet dangling, trying not to cry because crying made the nurses come with their needles. From the hallway, she saw, you'd hear the murmurs of men in suits. They weren't talking about helping her, they were talking about studying her. How her case might advance medical science, how no one outside these walls should know. She pressed her face against the cold glass of the window and realized she wasn't a daughter anymore. She was property. And worse, a part of her knew they wouldn't let her leave. The first night, they told her it was just a test. A nurse with pale hands and no expression rolled her sleeve up and tied a strip of rubber around her arm. The needle went in, and a vial of blood filled with a dark, sluggish red. "You're very brave," the nurse whispered, though her voice sounded more like a script than comfort. The second night there were 3 needles, one in her arm, one in her neck, and one in her back. She bit her lip so hard she tasted blood, trying not to scream. The men around her, doctors, professors, men in fine coats who smelled of ink and tobacco, scribbled in their notebooks as if her pain was merely data. They didn't speak to her anymore, they spoke over her. Unprecedented cell degradation, rapid ossification, age acceleration beyond recorded limits. Their words were big and cold, but she could feel what they meant in her bones. By the 3rd night, she stopped asking when she could go home. The room changed too. They brought in machines, gleaming brass devices with needles, wires and gears that clicked and whirred as they strapped them to her arms and chest. The machines hummed like angry insects, sending vibrations through her ribs. Each jolt made her see white light behind her eyes. They shaved a patch of her hair and pressed strange metal discs to her skull. One man in a black coat leaned close, whispering, "Stay very still." She could smell his breath, heavy with coffee and medicine, as the machine crackled. She was no longer a little girl to them. She was a phenomenon, a thing to be studied, dissected, and written about in journals. She could hear them arguing in the hallways late at night, words slipping through the cracks of her door. "If we publish too soon, they'll shut us down." "Not if she's the proof we need. She won't survive much longer." She clutched the edge of her blanket, her fingers trembling. She was unsure which was worse, the thought of dying here on a cold hospital bed, or surviving only to become their experiment forever. Every night, she promised herself she would escape. But every morning, she woke up with more wires on her body and more bruises on her arms. And deep down she knew she wasn't the first child they'd done this to. The hospital was never quiet at night. Even when the nurses dimmed the lamps and the doctors retreated to their offices, there was always something. A creak in the floorboards above her, the rattle of trolleys in distant hallways, the hum of the brass machines that never stopped running. But now there were whispers. She first heard them on the 4th night, after they'd tightened the restraints around her wrists so she wouldn't disturb the readings. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her body trembling from the injections. Then, somewhere beyond the door, a voice, soft, hoarse, and almost broken, spoke her name. "Anna." She froze. No one here ever used her name. Her breath caught in her throat. She turned her head toward the door, heart pounding. "Anna, help me." The voice was so faint, like a sigh slipping through a crack in the wall. She strained to listen, but before she could speak, heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor. A door slammed. Silence returned. That night, she didn't sleep. The next evening, she heard it again. But this time there were more voices. Whispers overlapping like a chorus, some crying, some begging, some mumbling strange words she didn't understand. "Don't let them touch your spine. They said I'd only be here a week. Please, tell them I'm still alive." She pressed her hands over her ears, but the voices seeped through anyway, filling her head until tears spilled down her cheeks. And then she saw it. In the corner of her dimly lit room, near the shadowy outline of the machine that monitored her pulse, something shifted. A pale hand, small, like a child's, curled around the bedpost. She gasped. When she blinked, it was gone. The next day she asked one of the nurses, "Are there other children here?" The nurse went pale. "Don't speak of them," she whispered sharply, glancing over her shoulder. "You'll only make it worse." That was the first time Anna realized this wasn't a hospital at all. It was a place where children vanished, a place where no one ever came to visit, a place where cries echoed through empty halls and were never answered. And now those cries were calling her. On the fifth night, Anna made a choice. She had been lying awake again, staring into the gloom of her room while the brass machines ticked and sighed like sleeping beasts. The whispers were louder tonight, closer, almost frantic. She could hear them bleeding through the thin walls, their words tangled in sobs. "Below, below. They buried us below." The voices wouldn't stop, and something inside her, a strange defiance she didn't recognize, snapped. She swung her legs over the side of the bed, ignoring the pain in her spine as the wires pulled against her skin. With trembling fingers, she unclipped them one by one. The hallway outside her door was dim, lit only by a flickering gas lamp at the far end. She slipped out barefoot, her hospital gown brushing her ankles. Every step was a prayer that no one would hear. The air smelled different here, heavier, damp, like mold and rust. She padded past rows of locked doors, each marked with nothing but a number scrawled in chalk. Behind one she heard a muffled sob. Behind another, a faint humming, like a lullaby sung through teeth. Anna quickened her pace. At the end of the hall stood a door unlike the others, thick, iron-banded, with a padlock the size of her fist. But someone had been careless. The lock hung loose, unlatched. She hesitated. The whispers were deafening now, pressing against her skull. "Below, below." Her hand shook as she pushed the door open. A wave of cold air swept over her, smelling of wet stone and something sweet and rotten. A narrow staircase spiraled downward, swallowed by darkness. She gripped the railing and descended, her heartbeat echoing louder than her footsteps. The basement was lit by a single swinging bulb that buzzed faintly overhead. The walls glistened with moisture, lined with shelves stacked with jars. At first, she thought they held specimens, organs maybe, but as she drew closer, her stomach turned. They were filled with faces, tiny, pale, perfectly preserved baby faces, their glassy eyes staring at her through the murky fluid. Anna staggered back, bile rising in her throat. She nearly screamed when she saw the wooden crates beside the shelves. They were filled with small hospital gowns, neatly folded, each one with a name tag. Some of the names matched the whispers she'd heard. And that's when she saw movement in the far corner. A metal crib, its bars bent outward as if something had tried to escape. The crib wasn't empty. At first, Anna thought the thing in the crib was dead. It lay so still beneath the dim, buzzing light, its skin a pallid grey that looked almost waxen. A tangle of wires snaked into its body, burrowed under its paper-thin skin like veins of black thread. Its chest rose and fell so faintly she almost missed it. Then its head turned. The motion was slow, mechanical. Its eyes, if they could be called that, were wide and glossy, reflecting the swinging bulb overhead like mirrors. There were no pupils, no whites, just two perfect glistening spheres. Anna froze, a cold sweat breaking down her spine. The thing opened its mouth and a dry, rasping sound crawled out. At first it was just a wheeze, but then she recognized the words, jagged and broken. "Help me." She stumbled backward, nearly knocking over one of the crates. The noise startled the creature. Its head twitched sharply and its thin, skeletal arms shot up, reaching for her. The wires tethered to its body went taut, making it jerk and convulse. "Mother." The word was slurred, gurgling, but unmistakable. Anna's heart slammed in her chest. She wanted to run. God, she needed to, but her legs wouldn't move. Something about the creature's voice rooted her in place. Its frail fingers clawed the air, grasping at nothing. And then she saw it. Its ribs weren't ribs at all. They were thin metal rods, polished to a shine, curving like the frame of a cage. Its chest cavity glimmered faintly as it breathed, gears clicking softly beneath translucent flesh. The thing was part machine. Anna stumbled back, knocking over a glass jar. It shattered on the floor, splashing its pale contents across her bare feet. She gagged at the stench but couldn't look away from the crib. The creature had gone still again, its mirror eyes fixed on her. Slowly it reached for the bars of the crib. The bent metal wasn't an accident, it had been trying to get out. From the shadows behind the crib, another sound stirred, a soft scraping, like claws on stone. And then she heard it, a second voice. "Don't wake her." Anna's breath hitched as the second voice slithered through the dark. It was soft, so soft she almost convinced herself she imagined it. Almost. The sound came again, clearer this time, curling through the stale air like smoke. "She's awake." Anna's eyes darted to the crib. The creature was still, perfectly still. Its head had twisted slightly, as if it too had heard the whisper. The wires in its body vibrated with a low metallic hum. Then, scrape. A soft drag of something heavy across the floor, from the far corner of the room. The darkness there was so deep it seemed to swallow the weak light, a patch of absolute black where the shadows had weight. Anna's pulse thundered in her ears. Her instincts screamed, "Do not move. Do not breathe." But she was already stepping back, barefoot on cold stone, glass crunching faintly beneath her heel. The darkness shifted. At first she thought it was a trick of the light, a shadow swaying, but then she realized the shape was too solid, too tall. It was hunched, but even crouched it scraped the rafters. Limbs bent wrong. A glint of metal caught the light where a face should have been. The voice came again, and this time it wasn't a whisper. It was inside her head. "You shouldn't have come here." Anna's breath hitched sharply. Her legs jolted, desperate to run, but the figure moved faster. A long, spider-like limb slid forward, clicking against the floor. Then another. It wasn't walking. It was unfolding. The light swung violently as if stirred by some unseen wind, and for the briefest moment she saw its face, a smooth, polished mask of black steel. No eyes, no mouth, just a mirror-like surface that reflected her wide, terrified eyes back at her. Anna stumbled into the table behind her. Bottles clattered and shattered on the ground. The figure stopped, tilted its head, and in the reflection of its mask she saw something big that made her stomach drop. There wasn't just one of them. Behind her, in the corner she'd just come from, another pair of reflections blinked into view. Anna ran. The instinct was primal. No thought, no plan, just raw survival. She spun toward the door, her shoulder slamming against the table and sending shards of glass skittering across the floor. Behind her came a screech of metal on stone, a sound so sharp it sliced straight through her skull. The creatures moved. Not fast at first, but fluid, their limbs clattering like insect legs as they unfurled themselves fully. Anna glanced back just in time to see one of them crawl up the wall like a spider, limbs bending backward with inhuman precision. The other glided low to the ground, its polished mask gleaming in the dim lantern light. She bolted down the narrow hallway, breath ragged, heart slamming in her chest. The walls felt closer than before, the ceiling lower, as if the house itself was shrinking around her. Then, clang. Something sharp struck the wall an inch from her face. A long, needle-like limb punched clean through the rotting wood, splinters exploding in every direction. Anna screamed, ducked low, and threw herself around a corner. The house moaned, an ancient groaning sound, as if its bones were shifting. She heard the second creature scuttling along the ceiling behind her, claws raking grooves into the plaster. She didn't dare look back again. Anna's bare feet slipped on the dusty floorboards as she skidded into a wider room, the kitchen, she realized, though it looked abandoned for decades. The windows were boarded over, light bleeding through thin cracks in the wood. She lunged toward the back door. Locked. Anna yanked and twisted the handle, panic flaring white-hot in her chest. Behind her came a chorus of metallic clicks and whispers, the sound of bodies sliding along walls and ceilings. The whispering voices were louder now, overlapping in a strange harmonic hum. Stay. Stay with us. She belongs here. Anna spun, breath ragged. Just as a black, glinting limb lashed out from the darkness, she ducked instinctively, the blade-like claw missing her by inches and slamming into the doorframe with a thunderous crack. She grabbed the nearest object, a rusted iron pan, and hurled it at the thing's head. The creature didn't flinch, but the distraction was enough. Anna spotted a narrow window above the sink, its glass cracked but not fully boarded. She didn't think. She just moved. Scrambling onto the counter, she threw her elbow through the glass, shards raining down around her. Behind her, the creatures surged forward, metal limbs clicking like gunfire. She hauled herself through the window just as a claw raked across her ankle, slicing open skin. She hit the cold ground outside, breath knocked from her lungs. The voices were still there, closer now. You cannot leave. The night outside was suffocating. Anna hit the ground hard, the cold dirt wet beneath her palms, and scrambled to her feet. Her ankle throbbed where the claw had sliced it open, warm blood running down into her shoe. She didn't stop to check it. She just ran. The air was thick with mist, curling around her legs like grasping hands. The forest loomed ahead, black trees stretching upward like skeletal fingers. There was no moon, no stars, just darkness, and the faint glow of the boarded-up house behind her. And then the sound began. A chorus of clicking, scraping metal, echoing out of every window of the house. The creatures weren't following her through the door. They didn't need to. The sound rolled over the clearing like a warning, like the tolling of some invisible bell. Anna plunged into the woods. Branches whipped at her face and arms as she ran, the trees so dense they felt like a maze. Every shadow seemed to move, every gust of wind carried whispers too soft to understand. Her lungs burned, her chest ached, but she couldn't stop. Not here, not now. Somewhere behind her, there was movement. Not the creatures, something else. She slowed, breath rasping, and turned her head. The mist in the forest had thickened into low-hanging clouds that glimmered faintly, as though reflecting light from somewhere deep within. Shapes moved in that mist, tall, thin silhouettes that swayed unnaturally between the trees. Anna's stomach turned cold. One of the figures stepped forward, and for the briefest second its head seemed wrong. Elongated, eyeless, tapering into a sharp point. It tilted toward her like a predator scenting prey. Anna stumbled backward, her heel catching on a root. She crashed to the ground, pain shooting through her elbow. Leaves and dirt clung to her palms as she scrambled to her knees, heartbeat deafening in her ears. The figure didn't move. It just watched, then snap. A branch broke behind her. Anna whipped around. Another figure stood just a few feet away, partially obscured by mist. Its movements were slow, deliberate, like a marionette guided by unseen strings. The creatures in the house had been mechanical, predictable. These were not. Anna pushed herself up and ran blindly, every instinct screaming at her to get away. The mist wrapped around her, chilling her skin, filling her lungs until each breath felt like she was drowning. And then she heard it. A voice, soft as silk, drifting through the trees. "You've wandered too far." Anna spun in a circle, gasping. The voice came again, closer. "You don't belong here." She turned and saw it. A pale face, impossibly close, staring at her from within the mist. Its mouth didn't move. The voice was inside her head. Anna screamed and bolted deeper into the woods, but no matter which way she turned, the mist seemed to guide her path. The forest wasn't just a place, it was alive, and it wanted her lost. By now you've realized this was never about one girl in one forgotten town. No, this story bleeds outward, into something far more dangerous. Institutions do not bury stories because they are oddities, they bury them because they are mirrors. Mary's body was not a mystery, it was a warning. The way her teeth sprouted endlessly, unrestrained, was a sign of what happens when life itself rejects the limits placed upon it. Imagine a body that refuses to obey medical law. Imagine a life form that does not bow to science, religion, or state decree. That is what she represented, a direct threat to control itself. And control is everything. It is the invisible chain wrapped around your throat the moment you are born. You are taught what to fear, what to love, what is acceptable, and what is insanity. Mary's existence blurred that line. Was she cursed, diseased, chosen? It didn't matter. What mattered was the fear she provoked in men who believed they were in control of nature. The church saw her as proof of something demonic, yet they whispered about her with curiosity too. Physicians documented her with trembling hands, trying to explain away what they could not, and the state, terrified of what she represented, quietly erased her from records. Because when power cannot understand something, it destroys it. But destruction does not mean disappearance. Her body, yes, her physical remains, still exist. Somewhere. The whispers say her skeleton was hidden in a Philadelphia medical archive, her teeth sealed in jars, labeled dental anomalies. But there are inconsistencies in those records. Boxes of samples have gone missing, notes have been redacted. Some believe her bones were divided, sent to separate cities to ensure no single person could piece together the truth. And yet occasionally, fragments resurface, a jar with oddly shaped teeth in an antique shop, a collector's whisper of a girl whose skeleton had teeth in every bone. The trail has never gone completely cold. You feel it now, don't you? That tension in your chest, the sense that you're brushing up against something not meant for you. That's not paranoia, it's instinct. The same instinct that made villagers bolt their doors when Mary's shadow passed by. The same instinct that made doctors burn pages of their own research. Knowledge has a pulse, and right now it's beating in your ears, warning you to stop. But stopping is a choice, one most men take, and that's why most men never see what's coming next. The deeper you follow her trail, the stranger it becomes. Mary's life is no longer a tale of pity or tragedy. It is a symbol of resistance against a world obsessed with erasure. Every record you find seems to be stitched with lies. Birth certificates altered, family names changed, entire church logs missing. It's as if someone, or something, wanted her story to vanish completely. But history has a way of speaking even when gagged. The last confirmed sighting of Mary alive was not in her home village, but in a dimly lit hospital ward 2 towns over. A nurse's diary, smuggled into private hands decades later, details the night Mary arrived. She wrote of a girl whose body seemed untrustworthy, as if it were rearranging itself beneath her skin. The nurse claimed Mary's jawbone pulsed like a living organ, her gums sprouting teeth faster than they could be extracted. The doctors spoke in Latin, the nurse scribbled, but I understood enough. They said this girl's body was not following human law. After that entry, there are no more records of Mary being alive. She simply disappears, replaced by whispers of the specimen being shipped to a university research facility in the dead of night. What happened in that building, no one knows. But strange things began happening in the months that followed. Fires that broke out in locked archives, doctors resigning suddenly, entire departments shuttered without explanation. Some say Mary died there, dissected and catalogued piece by piece. Others claim she didn't die at all. That theory is what haunts the most seasoned researchers. A chilling letter uncovered by a collector in the 1950s claimed Mary's body never decomposed. Her skin hardened, her hair continued to grow, and her teeth multiplied even in death. She is no corpse, the letter reads. She is a specimen that breathes when no one is watching. For decades, the letter was dismissed as sensationalism. But collectors and archivists speak of something else, crates that hum faintly, even when sealed, boxes marked dangerous, do not open, and government seizures of private collections with no explanation given. What they are guarding or hiding remains a mystery. One thing is certain, Mary Hartwell, or whatever she became, is not gone. She exists in fragments, scattered across the world, quietly rewriting herself in the dark. And someone is making sure you never see her whole. The truth isn't buried, it's guarded. When you start tracing Mary's name through university archives, you notice something chilling. Every collection that once held her medical records has a redacted inventory. Not a single researcher who handled her file is alive today. Some died of illnesses that struck overnight, others in freak accidents. A few simply vanished, their homes found empty, their notes burned in the fireplace, as though they had tried to destroy evidence in their final hours. The strangest detail is the recurring seals stamped across confiscated reports, Department of Anthropological Anomalies, property of the state. Officially, no such department exists, yet collectors and museum curators whisper of government agents who arrive before dawn, who take interest in certain relics, and who issue threats that are never spoken of again. One curator described them as men without fingerprints, who never blinked. Another never spoke again, found dead in his study 2 weeks later, eyes wide open. The deeper you dig, the clearer the pattern becomes. Mary's body was never buried. Her remains, if they can even be called that, were catalogued, studied and spirited away into an underground network of vaults and private laboratories, and there's evidence she may not be the only one. There are vague references to other children, other biological outliers, whose lives were cut short in the name of science, or something darker. These references all end in the same warning, scrawled in desperate handwriting. Do not attempt to reconstruct her. She is incomplete for a reason. This line chills you to your core because it suggests that Mary isn't a freak accident of nature. She's a fragment, a part of something larger. There's one more file, older than the rest, hidden deep within a library that claims not to have it. In its brittle pages lies a hand-drawn sketch, not of Mary, but of a human figure with too many teeth to count, eyes drawn like hollow pits. Its skin is marked with glyphs that resemble a map. And there, at the bottom of the page, in the archivist's shaky handwriting, is a single phrase: "If she becomes whole, we will remember what we were meant to forget." For a moment, you feel the urge to stop, to close every file, burn every lead, and walk away. Because this is no longer about Mary Hartwell. It's about the thing she was meant to keep sealed. You leave the archive long past midnight, the sound of your footsteps echoing down the empty corridor like gunshots. The file you shouldn't have touched weighs heavy in your bag, as though it knows you've stolen something sacred. Outside, the air feels wrong, too still, too heavy. Even the street lamps seem dimmer, as if the world itself resents what you've uncovered. Mary Hartwell isn't a story. She's a warning. Her life was carved away piece by piece, her body turned into a puzzle no one dares complete. The scientists who studied her didn't just fail to understand her, they were terrified of what she might reveal. That's why her name was erased, why her bones were hidden in vaults, why even now, over a century later, you're being watched. Because the truth is this: Mary wasn't born broken. She was born with a design no one could comprehend, a blueprint of something older than humanity itself. Every record, every sketch, every whispered testimony points to the same dreadful possibility. Mary was never meant to live among us. She was a message, a key, and someone somewhere has spent generations making sure that key is never turned. You'll never find her grave because there isn't one. You'll never see her body because it's locked away, or worse, still being studied. And those who dig too deeply, who dare to say her name, end up silenced, one by one. As you walk home, your phone buzzes. An unknown number. No message, just a single image, a hand-drawn eye. The same one from the sketch, staring directly at you. You feel the weight of a presence behind you, but when you turn, the street is empty. You tell yourself it's paranoia, that Mary's story is just a curiosity of medical history, nothing more. But that night, when you close your eyes, you dream of her. Not as a child, but as something else, her jaw unhinging, her gaze hollow yet alive, her body humming with that same low vibration the doctors once wrote about but never explained. When you wake, there's a sound in your room, a soft, rhythmic tapping, and for the first time you understand why they erased her, because some knowledge doesn't just haunt you, it follows you home.